Well, the 25th Amendment, as I have it here, convolutions. And we'll see why I call it convolutions further down the road here. Um, what do you do? Um, our president is seriously disabled. James Garfield was shot in the summer of midsummer in 1881, lingered for almost exactly 2 months, and then died. And, he was perfectly capable of making decisions. But over time, he decayed. And of course, he's going to end up dying. Um, and so there's those 2 months there where you do and you don't have a president who's functioning. So his successor, Chet Arthur. Chet Arthur was dying as he took the oath of office. I mean, he had Bright's disease. His wife would die. He would go into a deep depression, and when he leaves office in 1885, he's more dead than alive, and certainly still in the midst of a Great Depression. Was he functional? Marginally so, but I don't know that he will. I don't think he should have actually been in the White House making decisions. The Woodrow Wilson, one of our most classic cases. Wilson was a stubborn man to begin with, and probably had a series of strokes in the White House. Certainly, we think he had one in September of 1919, but he had a massive stroke in October of 1919. And he, for about 2 months, he was way more dead than alive, pretty much non compos mentis. And then he's going to recover well enough to work for an hour a day. But he has, you know, that's not much time to be president in. But Wilson would not have, I can't think of a circumstance under which Wilson would have voluntarily turned over the presidency. In fact, he's elected for a second term in 1960, and then he was thinking of running for a third term in 1920, despite the fact that he was so disabled. Franklin Roosevelt. Now, if Roosevelt looks like a healthy man to you, I suggest you go see your optometrist. This is in the fall of 1944. He is going to die in April of 1945. He could work maybe 3 hours a day. His attention wandered all over the place. Of all people, Joe Stalin, who was not exactly known for his mercy in negotiating with Franklin Roosevelt, turned to one of his aides and said, "Why would God make a man suffer so much?" Referring to Roosevelt, who quite clearly should not have been in office after 1944. Mother Nature made him leave office, and you don't want that happening. And then there's the case of Ronald Reagan. What you do with Reagan? I think the stories that Reagan had or suffered from Alzheimer's, when he came to the presidency and stuff like that, not true. He's diagnosed in 1994, which indicates that he probably began to develop Alzheimer's around the time of his second inaugural. Reagan, in looking at his second inaugural, said, and Reagan, of course, wrote much of his own speeches. Reagan said, that's not as good as I used to do. Colin Powell, in either 1987 or 1988, said that Reagan was the tiredest man he had ever met. Now, we know that Reagan's diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 1994, and Alzheimer's probably began about 10 years earlier. For about 10 years, your results are somewhat the impact of Alzheimer's is somewhat subterranean. Having said that, Reagan made a number of good decisions in 87 and 88, just ask Mikhail Gorbachev. And so, I don't know, should he have been removed? Tough decision, and one that thank goodness, didn't have to make. The question, of course, is who is president? And here we see one of the most competent of all presidents, Dwight Eisenhower. Well, Eisenhower, extremely competent man. Eisenhower had a stroke, a heart attack, and almost died from ileitis while he was in office. During that time, Richard Nixon chaired cabinet meetings. Richard Nixon was his vice president. Nixon pointedly went out of his way not to sit in Eisenhower's place, and ran the cabinet meetings well. I think everybody would agree on that. But did Nixon have presidential powers? Really good question. I don't know. I don't happen to know the answer to that. Or should he have? Because the Constitution provides that in case of the removal of the president from office or of his death, resignation, or inability to discharge the powers and duties of said office, the same shall devolve on the vice president. So, would Richard Nixon have been able to veto a bill? I just have no idea. And nobody else does. As I read the Constitution, yes. But I wouldn't bet a penny farthing on that. So we get to the 25th Amendment. The 25th Amendment was enacted after Kennedy's death. Just think if Oswald's bullet had been off a little bit more, you could have ended up with a brain-damaged president. And it says that, well, first off, in Section 2, it says whenever there's a vacancy in the office of the vice president, the president shall nominate a vice president who shall take office upon confirmation by a majority vote of both houses of Congress. Okay, now that's fairly clear. Let's say a vice president drops over dead. The president nominates a new vice president, Congress confirms it. There's a problem with this. That means the vice president is unelected. One of the two nationwide elected officers in line, one of them is now unelected. So you end up with the following weird situation that happened in the mid-1970s. Richard Nixon, Vice President Spiro Agnew resigns. He was going to be arrested. Richard Nixon nominates Gerald Ford. Perfectly fine nomination. Congress confirms him. So you have an unelected vice president. Then Richard Nixon resigns. So an unelected vice president now becomes an unelected president, who then nominates an unelected vice president, Nelson Rockefeller. So the two highest offices in the land are occupied by unelected officials. That clearly is not what Congress anticipated happening, but that clearly is exactly what happened. That you end up with two people in the highest elected offices in the country being unelected. Then there's whenever the president, the Section 3 of the 25th Amendment, whenever the president transmits to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives his written declaration that he is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, and until he transmits to them a written declaration of the contrary, such powers and duties shall be discharged by the vice president as acting president. That's pretty clear. And Nixon, Reagan underwent surgery for colon cancer. He signs the documents, and for a short period of time, George H.W. Bush becomes acting president. And then when Reagan comes out of anesthesia, and he reclaims his powers. And somebody said to him, "Don't worry, Mr. President, the government is running." And Reagan responded something to the effect of, "What makes you think I'll be happy about that?" Anyway, and then we get to the real kicker in here, and that's Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. Suppose you have a Woodrow Wilson case where the president is not only out of it, non compos mentis, or just flat out unable to function. What do you do? And the first paragraph there, or first bullet point there, is whenever the vice president and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or of such other body as Congress may by the law provide, transmit to the President pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House the written declaration that the President is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. The Vice President shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office of acting President. Okay, so the President's unable to, for whatever reason, has had a stroke, something awful has happened to them. So the Vice President, the cabinet, basically the Vice President, a majority of the cabinet says that the President can't function as president, no longer able to function as President. Therefore, the Vice President takes over as acting President. Gosh, I wonder if there have ever been any Vice Presidents, Aaron Burr comes immediately to mind, who would dearly have loved to have been president, would have been happy to bribe and otherwise seduce the rest of the cabinet into making him president. I picked Aaron Burr out of the thin air, of course. And this thing about, or of such other body as Congress may by law provide. So what, the American Veterinary Association? There's nothing to keep them from doing so. They can give it over to the vets if they want to. So there's, from the very beginning here, this is a poorly thought out section. And of course, as I said, the temptation to make things go wrong. Well, Congress was not unaware that sometimes you have ambitious vice presidents. And so they put in there a way for the president to take his power back. Thereafter, when the president transmits to the President pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives his written declaration that no inability exists, he shall resume the powers and duties of his office. Boom. So let's say that, either the American Veterinary Association or the cabinet decides that the president can't perform his office. That instant, the president can write a letter saying, I can perform the duties of my office, and send it over to the Speaker and the President pro tem of the Senate, and he's president again, and the acting president goes away. However, the Woodrow Wilson case. Wilson, even if somebody had to guide his hand, Wilson would have signed a document saying that he was fit to exercise office. So what do you do then? So the vice president and majority of the cabinet, or whatever other group you're picked to make this decision, have 4 days to transmit to the Congress a statement that the president actually isn't fit to exercise the duties of his or her office. Oh, I would hate to be in Congress at this moment. It's because on one hand, you've got the vice president who's basically saying that he should be president. On the other hand, you've got the elected president who says that he should be president, or she. And so as a result here, you end up with this really nasty situation. Thereupon, Congress shall decide the issue, assembling within 48 hours for that purpose, if not in session. Okay, so now, the cabinet and the vice president send a second note saying that the president is not able to exercise his or her duties. And the president sends a note saying, yes, I can. And now, you lucky Congress people, you senators and representatives, you get to decide this one. Good luck with this. The Congress has to meet within 48 hours to make a decision. Now, they don't have, it's not 48 hours, it's 48 hours they have to have in which they have to meet. But they can take 21 days to make the decision. And by the way, and if in 21 days they don't make a decision, and can you imagine Congresses as divided as we have had in recent years, agreeing on much of anything, then the president, the original president, becomes president again. I think I'd rather have several root canals at the same time as to be in the Congress that's making this decision. And of course, the opportunities for mischief here are massive. Can you imagine all the lobbying that would go on in such a situation where both the vice president and the president were contending that they should be the ones in office? Just think of the arm twisting, the subtle little ways of getting at people. This would make the assassination of Julius Caesar look tame. So I can't imagine what the country would go through in this situation, unless it was a Wilson case, where it was quite clear that Wilson should not have been president. Well, in any instance, the whole thing turns into this kind of this crazy situation. Should the 25th Amendment have been passed? Well, I don't think the idea of filling in the vice president's slot, even if it is with somebody who's not elected, is a bad. That's okay. But boy, that's Section 4. It just opens the door to endless mischief. There are all kinds of things that go wrong. The people who make it into Congress and make it into the Senate and make it to the vice president and make it to cabinet are not shy people. And they want power. Sometimes they want money too, but mostly power. And so can you just imagine sometimes there's payback. And maybe people get paid, and maybe you can pay back the president for something. And so if they woke me up tomorrow and told me that the 25th Amendment had been rescinded, I would think, damn, that was a good idea. Let's get rid of it. But it's what we have right now. It's a Congress. It's a Constitution. It's a fully part of the Constitution. And we are going to have to live with it. And I can't say that I'm happy with it, but I am going to tell you that what I just told you is accurate. And the reasons I told you and the examples I gave you are accurate. So you make your own decisions on this one. Okay, out there, everybody, stay calm, stay safe, and above all, stay healthy. Okay, and hopefully we'll all be together when everything straightens out. Bye-bye.